pronouns. I'm the chair of this committee, and then Directors Moore and Director Brim Edwards are the members of the committee, and Director Bailey is joining us here because it's such a fun committee. People don't want to miss it. And then we're going to have staff with us as well, and I know we've got our public commenters here. So let's go ahead and dive into the public comment, and I believe we have 3 people for public comment, and let me bring that up as well. We have, I think is it Ada Crandall, Joe Cortwright, and Aaron Brown? Is that right? Are the 3 of you sort of testifying? I know it's all on the same subject. Are you sort of testifying in a combined way or separately?
Yeah, Board Member Scott, first, oh, it is online. Sorry, it wasn't streaming, but it is. We were hoping it would be Ada, Joe, and then myself, if that's all right. Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So let's go ahead and dive in, and you'll have 3 minutes each, and we'll just give you a friendly reminder when we get to that point. So Ada, I think you are going to kick us off.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Ada Crandall, and I'm a freshman at Grant High School. When I was in 7th grade at Harriet Tubman, my classmates and I learned that our school had some of the worst air pollution in the entire state. Tubman sits just 30 feet from one of the busiest parts of I-5, and on bad days, we could literally see smog in the air during recess. As we started learning more about diesel pollution and the associated health risks, we got involved with the fight to pass House Bill 2007, which would regulate diesel emissions in the state of Oregon. We got on a school bus and drove to Salem, where we gave testimony in favor of the bill and spoke to our legislators about how important it was to us. When HB 2007 ended up passing, it felt like a huge victory. It was the first time I truly believed that even as a kid, people would care what I had to say, and that our legislators and leaders would be willing to do what it took to build a better world for future generations. But I was wrong. Shortly after the diesel regulation bill passed, I learned that ODOT had plans to expand I-5 even further. It doesn't take an expert to tell you that more lanes means more vehicles, and more vehicles means more pollution around my school and in the Albina neighborhood. I don't go to Tubman anymore, but that doesn't make me any less concerned. I am worried for the safety of future generations of students, and I want them to go outside and see trees and grass and a beautiful blue sky, not huge diesel trucks on a freeway that's so close to our school it may as well be the playground. I don't want them to have to worry about whether or not the air they're breathing at recess will one day lead to asthma or lung cancer. These are not big asks. These are basic human rights that I assumed Portland Public Schools would want to fight for. Tubman students in the Albina neighborhood should not be denied the basic right to clean air, and school board members, it is your responsibility to fight for these rights. As I've continued my work with climate justice, I've also realized that the situation at Tubman is a lot more than just an environmental problem. It's not a coincidence that the richer, predominantly white schools on the west side are not dealing with these same issues as Tubman, a school that serves 60% students of color. Time and time again, Black, Brown, and Indigenous people have been disproportionately affected by climate disasters and targeted by racist city planning policies. And the Rose Quarter Freeway expansion is a perfect example of this. There is absolutely no way ODOT can claim freeway expansion is restorative justice when the original construction of I-5 is what displaced many original Albina residents in the first place, and when the existing freeway is literally making Tubman students sick. I'm excited about the proposals put forth by the Albina Vision Trust and the ideas of capping the freeway, but all of these things can be done without ODOT spending $800 million on increasing toxic emissions. In addition to concerns about what this expansion will mean for air pollution, I'm also terrified about its climate impact. Already, 40% of Oregon's carbon emissions come from transportation, and I don't understand how people can sit idly by and watch ODOT make those statistics worse when we have so little time to take action against the climate crisis. My future, my classmates' future, our siblings' futures, and the entire Tubman and Portland community is depending on all of you to wake up and realize that the crisis we're facing. We're counting on you to choose the right side of history and stand with us as we fight for racial, social, and climate justice. We're counting on you to stand with us as we demand ODOT conduct a full environmental impact statement on the Rose Quarter Freeway expansion, because it is the only way to guarantee the protection of our lungs, communities, and planet.
Thank you, Ada. Appreciate that. Appreciate your testimony. Okay, next up, Joe Cortwright. And if everyone could just make sure you're muted when you're not talking, that would be.
Ms. Crandall is a very difficult act to follow. The PPS is doing a great job. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the effect of the Rose Quarter project on Tubman Middle School. I'm with No More Freeways. I'm an economist in town. And as you know, Tubman Middle School predates the existence of I-5. It was originally built, school was built originally in 1950, and the I-5 freeway not built until about 12 years later. So the freeway really has intruded onto the school grounds already. And ODOT's plan is to move it even closer. And it looks like something on the order of 20 or 25 feet closer. And we've looked at the plans, or tried to get as best we can the plans. We followed or filed public records requests to get plans. And in the materials that I've submitted to you for the record, I have shown the plans that we were able to obtain via our public records request. I've shown you how that compares to the property lines for the Tubman site. And as you can see, there's not only a take of Tubman property that's anticipated here, but also there's the construction of 2 sound walls. And just to give you some idea, because in all of their renderings of the project, they haven't, as far as I know, produced any renderings that show what these sound walls do to Tubman Middle School. But they're 22-foot tall sound walls that will run for more than 1,000 feet from the far end of Lillis Albina Park past the school to Flint Avenue. And just for reference, the Berlin Wall was only about half that high. So this is a rather significant wall. And the other thing I need to emphasize is we're a little bit unclear on where these will exactly be located. The plans aren't as precise as we would like. Moreover, as we now know, the project's expert peer review committee has recommended that the sound walls be moved even closer to the school because they don't think they're effective in their current location. And by the way, I mentioned there are 2 of them. The other thing I want to emphasize, and I think this is significant, is I don't think you can trust ODOT's air quality or noise analysis because it's predicated on them building a 6-lane freeway rather than the 10-lane or 8-lane freeway that they can easily build given the 160-foot roadway that they're constructing. And in just the last 2 months or so, we've obtained 3 ODOT documents, they're contained in the material that I've submitted, that show you this isn't just a 4-lane to 6-lane expansion, it's really as much as a 10-lane expansion. And their traffic modeling and their air quality modeling and their noise modeling doesn't reflect the volume of traffic that would be moving through and past the school and through this neighborhood with a 10-lane freeway, which they can easily accomplish. And the other thing that I've documented in the material here, and I'm sure it's well known to you, is just the dramatic socioeconomic and demographic disparity between the children who have to breathe in this site and go to school here and the commuters who are going by on the road. And the fiscal disparity between Portland Public Schools being expected to pay $10 or $15 million just to make the air quality in the building breathable, while ODOT's is going to spend $800 million next door to make the problem worse. So there's a huge socioeconomic and racial disparity, obviously, between who benefits from this project and who bears the costs of it. With that, I'll just pause, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Great, thank you, Joe. I appreciate the comment. We generally don't engage in Q&A during the public comment, but we are going to be discussing this on our agenda today. So you're welcome to stick around. I think we'll have a
thank you.
Conversation, an update on the projects. All right, Aaron.
Good afternoon. I have to follow both Ada and Joe, so that's really difficult. First, my name is Aaron Brown. I've worked with many of you on some various school boards or school bonds and levies. It's great to see many of you here today. And I also just first want to predicate that, man, it's been a rough year. And I'm so grateful for all of PPS's time and attention. I can't even imagine that somehow we've got time to chat with you about this, knowing that the reopening conversation is about to go underway. And I just want to express my sincere gratitude to all of you navigating really unfathomably difficult circumstances. It is exemplary public service that all of you have navigated this last year. So just true commendations and appreciation. I'm really just here to clean up on anything that Ada and Joe missed, and they didn't miss all that much. I would just say that No More Freeways, the organization that Joe and I and Ada, Joe and I especially have been part of, filed a lawsuit this last week through a NEPA complaint, along with our partners at Neighbors for Clean Air, as well as the Elliott Neighborhood Association. We're happy to provide, it sounds like many of you have already gotten some of this documentation. We're happy to follow up with any and all of you afterwards to be able to look through the specifics of this complaint. But there's 1 or 2 specific details that I wanted to just make sure getting ahead of some of ODOT's response to our lawsuits. So ODOT's, after our lawsuit, was essentially pointing out a lot of the stuff Joe mentioned about hiding some of the traffic projections were bunk, and all of the ways in which ODOT was deliberately misrepresenting the impacts that this project would have to the Tubman community, to the lungs of the Tubman students, to the planet that the Tubman students stand to inherit, and what just that much poisonous air means in this greater scheme of restorative justice in the Albina neighborhood. In 2019, we thoroughly debunked all of their traffic projections. Joe is the traffic wonk. I did not have quite the same math education that I think Joe and Ada and others are going for, but we found numerous parts in ODOT's traffic projections when they were blatantly misrepresenting the proposed traffic implications. And that is relevant because, as Joe mentioned, it's not just about the lanes, but it's also about ODOT did not study the impacts of congestion pricing, which the Oregon House Bill 2017 funding that provides the funding for the Rose Quarter is also supposed to allow. They did not study the impacts of induced demand. We know it's empirical reality that expanding lanes of a freeway makes more people drive. ODOT didn't study the impacts of that on their traffic projections. ODOT included the Columbia River crossing, which never got built. In their traffic projections, they include multiple freeway expansions that never got built, but in their modeling did. In multiple circumstances, their fingers were on the scales that changed how many cars and throughput are going through that neighborhood, which therefore lend unnecessary, egregious ridiculousness to their assertions that somehow this will be the first freeway expansion anywhere in North America ever, the unicorn of a freeway expansion to reduce air pollution or to reduce carbon emissions. So a year after we came up with that, that was all in 2019 when we got on the record, ODOT conducted this peer review that you might have heard a little bit in some of their comments in the last week. And that peer review, they brought in a bunch of independent consultants that specialized in air pollution and carbon emissions, and all of them said, yeah, actually this freeway is going to lower air pollution and carbon emissions. And the reason they were able to say that is that these consultants were not given the opportunity to critique the data that ODOT originally provided. So ODOT's bunk data that we dissected 2 years ago was never challenged or critiqued. So if ODOT comes back to you in the weeks and months ahead saying, oh, look, don't worry about it, these guys don't know what they're talking about. Well, ODOT didn't let that peer review panel actually review the spot where ODOT hid all of the data. So I'm happy to stick around and answer questions. I know that this is a meeting, so we'll just be listening in, but we're having a rally tomorrow at Tubman. By the way, thank you to your facility staff that have graciously allowed us to pay for the right to show up and trash the building before the students, not the building, we'll be in the yard and we will be very respectful and we will have plenty of garbage cans. But on Friday afternoon, tomorrow from 5 to 7, we've got a bunch of speakers, including Ada is going to be speaking, and Joe, and some other community leaders. And I just wanted to make sure that all of you felt invited and welcome to join us tomorrow at Tubman at 5 p.m. Thank you very much for your service.
Great, thank you. Thanks to the three of you for your testimony today. And I do appreciate the PowerPoint. It was sent around to board members, and I would just say to my fellow directors, if you haven't had a chance to look through it, it has a lot of very interesting and helpful information. Is that PowerPoint something that you'll be making available on your website? And if so, do you want to say what that website is?
Go for it, Joe.
Yeah, well, it'll be at least two places. We have two websites. We have the No More Freeways website that Aaron supervises, and also I run a little think tank called City Observatory, and it's part of our analytical work looking at the impact of freeways on cities throughout the United States. So it'll be posted there as well.
Yeah, so www.nomorefreewayspdx.com.
And sorry, cityobservatory.org.
Great. Thank you very much. Excellent.
Uploaded meeting materials just as like submitted comments, just like as if it were written testimony.
Yeah, I think the issue, Julia, is that we don't generally allow people to do testimony to do presentations. So that's the only reason why we didn't allow them to show it today, was just because of that rule. So I wanted to let people know where it would be available, so they could take a look at it.
Yeah, well, it's not too much of an issue because it's not like a presentation, but I think it just has to be as a submitted written comment as well. Seems like another place.
Okay, great. Let's look into that. Yeah, and Julia, it's really hard to hear you. So just FYI, I don't know if that's something we can fix as we go forward in the meeting, but I could hear you, but it was kind of cutting in and out. So, but yes, we will look into that option. Okay, let's dive in. I know, Courtney, we had legislative update next on the agenda. Did you have anything you wanted to share with this group?
Yeah, thank you, Director Scott, and hello, good evening, board members. We've got a couple extras tonight. Nice to see Director Constant and Director Bailey. So as you can expect, based on my my many weekly updates about legislative session. Things are moving really fast. It's really hard to do this virtually. Everything's so formal because you have to set meetings without, you can't just grab someone in the hallway. I think I've mentioned that before. It's just an ongoing frustration with this process, but it's also nice to not have to commute. So there's that little silver lining, I guess. The biggest issue right now, I think, facing K-12 during this legislative session is the budget. I alluded to that in my last update. The co-chairs of Ways and Means released their framework a couple of weeks ago. The framework has the state school fund at $9.1 billion, which is exactly the same number that the governor's requested budget had. Typically, the number that comes from the co-chairs is a couple billion higher, or I mean, a couple 100,000 higher than the 100 million. Sorry, I'm getting, there's too, I need to add some zeros. Typically higher. And so the starting point for the co-chair's budget being the same as the governor's budget is very concerning for the K-12 advocates, and we're all in close communication about the best way to advocate. I think there's a sentiment in Salem or among legislators and the Legislative Fiscal Office that we're somehow flush with cash because of CARES and the American Recovery Act and all these other one-time opportunities that have come our way. And so we are working on how do we tell the story that the state school fund is our operating budget. It's our perennial, you know, this is what we pay teachers with. And it's our per pupil allotment versus some of the other buckets that we have and we're grateful for, Measure 98, the Student Success Act, and in particular the Student Investment Account. But those are tied to other things and are very focused dollars and equity focused investments in the case of the SIA and career and technical education in the case of Measure 98. So that's I think the rub here is how do we communicate that in a way that makes sense to people who aren't paying attention to all of the things that are very specific to how we operate our schools in this, you know, in the current environment with COVID in the background, but also going forward as we recover and as we continue to do the important work we would have been doing anyway, but we're adding a layer of difficulty because of the pandemic. So I just want to raise that with you because I think it's going to be a pretty hot topic for a while. The Ways and Means co-chairs are doing a virtual road show. They do this every couple of years when there's a biennial budget discussion. They're doing it by congressional district. Congressional District 3, Portland, will be April 21st from 5:30 to 7:30. I'll share all the information on how to watch it, how to sign up. We're working with our partners to kind of carefully orchestrate the lineup of who we submit to offer testimony, because there's only going to be 2 hours and there's, you know, everyone who has anything they want to talk about related to the budget gets to come out and sign up. So it's going to be limited to how many K-12 people they're going to let speak. So we're trying to coordinate so that we make sure we get our people in. But I do think there will also be an opportunity to submit written testimony. So again, I'll share more information about that, but that's going to be one of the few ways that board members and superintendents and others in the education space can weigh in on the budget. And we are also working closely with our chief financial officer and the School Business Officers Association to make sure that we understand the impacts of what a $9.1 billion budget means for PPS and for all the other school districts. There's no one that's going to be faring well under this scenario. So the message is going to be pretty clear. And the current kind of drumbeat is 9.6 is the number we're shooting for. So we'll see if we can get there. I hope we can get there. I hope we can get above 9.1. I feel pretty good that we could get above that, but it's just going to be a fight. And everything else, you know, there's a lot. The deadline for scheduling scheduling and having work sessions on bills is the 13th, which is Tuesday. So we're right at the halfway mark in session. Problematic bills, this is that time when they sort of start to fall away. There's a lot of good little things. I don't want me to diminish them, but they're just not, the budget is just the elephant in the room. I know Amy Director Constam, excuse me, will be excited to know that they passed in the Senate Bill 513, which is the civics education bill. And we talked about that it's mentioned in our legislative agenda. There's quite a few bills to get student voice in the process, which I think is great. and specifically getting students that have not been in the room, so getting them involved in the legislative process. And so there's a lot of good stuff out there, but again, I think where we have kind of had to, I think, focus our attention going forward right now is on the budget. And I'm happy to answer any questions about anything in particular. Another one, I just because it's relevant to many of you that were on the board when the pilot happened at Grant High School around menstrual products in high schools. There's a bill right now that's I submitted some written testimony. I'm hoping moves because it's really good. It's a really good bill, but it has a fiscal, so we're trying to work through what that could look like so that it doesn't just die a slow death. I hope we can work through something that would model what we've done, because we know that that's an equity issue.
That's great. Thanks, Courtney. Any questions for Courtney about current legislative items?
Courtney, this is Julia. Thanks for the update. Really appreciate it. Are you working with the district student council at all as a way to also have student voice from PPS show up?
Thank you for the
Salem?
question. It's on my list. We just got the list of when those events were, so not yet, but yes, I will let them know and engage them.
Courtney, I know Chair Lowry testified in her personal capacity, I believe, about 16 and 17-year-olds voting. Any prospect on that bill or updates?
Ooh, good question. I don't have the update, but I'll get before the end of this meeting. I will, so I'll report back on that. But thank you. Yeah, that's great. There were a couple of bills running simultaneously recently around allowing younger than 18, 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in school board elections, and then also lowering the voting age in general, which I think is a tougher hill to climb. But I will let you know by the end of this meeting where that bill is. I can't remember.
Great, thanks. Any other questions?
Just along that lines, so to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in school board elections, that's like that can be done at a state level, obviously. That just I thought that's not set by some sort of national or federal standard.
It's in state statute. It can be changed.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Great. Okay, thanks for the. Yep.
Can I ask about the current service level? Is there any discussion about fixing the current service level formula to reflect actual costs?
It's all part of the larger discussion, Rita. Director Moore, I'm sorry. I'm very informal with you, and I don't mean to be. I've just worked with some of you for so long.
I prefer informal committees, Courtney. I think you know that, so I'm good.
Okay. Well, Director Moore, good question. Yeah, it's part of the conversation around the 9-1. It's really a fight with the Legislative Fiscal Office. We've continued to spread the message to them and to others that if we do a split 50-50, it's not going to work. We need it to be the 49-51 or the 49-51. Yeah, 49-51. Sorry, had to think about it. So yeah, it's definitely on our radar, and I know that that's been an ongoing something that you've brought up before, and that all the advocates have brought up time and time again, frankly.
So it's not just the 49-51 split. It's also the fact that it underestimates the costs for those districts that had the foresight and the wherewithal to take out bonds for PERS. Is that even on the table?
It's not. There's no bill to address that issue because it's really more of a conversation, and I don't know where that is right now, but I can check in.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Before we move on, Courtney, I know this is on your radar, but it's, I think, important for us all to think about making sure that the legislature is aware of federal guidance around not supplanting state budget based on the federal appropriations. And I think there is likely to be more specific language coming down from the feds as attached to the ESSER provisions, where we'll actually have to provide some kind of accountability and documentation that state funds have not been supplanted. But we need to keep kind of raising that and making sure that there are no shenanigans going on at the legislature based on the money that they see coming in from the feds.
Yeah.
And report back to us about any of those conversations.
Mm-hmm. I'm happy to. And while I've got the floor, Director Scott, the 16, 17-year-old voting in school board elections bill is sitting in the Senate Rules Committee, and that committee is not bound by deadlines. So there's more time to discuss it. And sometimes things go to rules to not move, and sometimes they go there for more time. So I will keep you posted.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we are almost half an hour in, but actually Danny Ledesma has joined us and sort of on the same agenda item as a legislative update, not a state legislative update, but a local legislative update. I know Danny wanted to just give a brief update on City of Portland gun violence reduction issue. Is that right, Danny?
Yeah, just really quickly, I apologize for arriving late. The City Council yesterday discussed a pretty far-reaching approach to reducing violence for the next year. They allocated $6 million across several program areas. And, under the leadership of Commissioner Rubio, they really sort of tried to take a community-centered approach to violence prevention. And so myself, Chair Kafori, most of our partners that we partner with, we all sort of provided testimony in support of this approach, which is basically to try to do some more collaboration and coordination across city bureaus and across the county. There was a counselor from the city of Gresham that was there as well that also testified. And there are two areas that are probably of most interest to you all. The first being they are going to invest a little over $3 million into additional funding for grants to organizations that do some of the violence prevention as well as intervention through the Office of Youth Violence Prevention that Ms. Nike Green runs. And the general, I don't have to tell you this twice, but the general research supports that the more we can have youth engaged in positive activities, it goes a long way towards violence prevention. And for too long, we've been a little bit downstream of that funding and investment, particularly for summer. So this $3.5 million that the city's investing will support those grants, and they're hoping to do the year-long grants to organizations that we know very well. So you heard testimony from Joe McFerrin at the last board meeting. He's one of the grantees that they work with pretty closely through POIC. So we're looking forward to partnering with them in that. The other piece that is probably of interest to you is the Park Ranger program. So not as a replacement for police, although the city is proposing an increased investment in the Park Ranger program to have more visible presence for park rangers at park sites, not only to increase the hours during the day, but also to provide graveyard shift coverage. Earlier in the year, the city invested more funding to support the Junior Ranger program as well, which is nice because we certainly want our students who are interested in the outdoors and parks and that work to be able to do their park rangers are led by Vicente, who is really helpful with us during some of the hate crime incidents that happened at Bridle Mile and the park adjacent to Bridle Mile. So we look forward to continuing to partner with them. As you'll hear in upcoming board meetings, we'll be releasing a request for proposals for summer enrichment programming, and where we intend to really sort of collaborate with both the city and our partners at Multnomah County is in the sort of execution of these proposals for summer. So we're making sure that youth of all ages are engaged in positive activities, partnering with community-based, culturally specific, and multiracial organizations to provide those engaging sort of prevention programs that we know do a lot to reduce crime overall, and also to provide really positive spaces for students. So you'll hear more from that. We're really excited because with the city's investment in some of those programs more on the intervention side, our investment in those programs on the prevention side, and then Multnomah County's investment in additional behavioral health and mental health supports, we think that we can go into the summer after the year that we've had with a lot less anxiety about sort of the violence to come, because we've got solutions, and not only are we, but our sister jurisdictions are investing heavily in wanting to work on the prevention side. So I just wanted to let you know, we worked with, Commissioner Rubio, Commissioner Ryan, Commissioner Mapps, Commissioner Hardesty, and also the mayor's office was supportive as well. And so I think, I just wanted to make sure that you all knew about all of those connections and how we're really trying to be good partners and make sure that we're all in alignment. And I think that's it.
Great. Thank you, Danny. Thanks for that update. That is, yeah, I'm glad that we're
Andrew?
partnering. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Am I
Sure.
coming through better now?
Yes, we can hear you great. Thank you.
Okay, great. Danny, thanks for the update. I'm really glad to hear about the nimble response from the city and the district, and love the partners it sounds like that we potentially have lined up. Did you say that's coming to us through contracts, or it's going, in what form is it, or does the district already have the contracts in place to move ahead for the summer programming?
We have existing partnerships, but this is really, we're trying to really have like a robust set of programs for summer. And so to be able to do that with the amount of investment that we're proposing, we wanted to do a call for proposals. So we're anticipating that we will continue to support partners that we already have existing partnerships. We'll probably support partners that we haven't had a relationship with yet. And then I anticipate that there will be lots of new partnerships that are formed that may look differently. So we are, we're of course going to be advertising to our set of contractors that we work with, our RESJ partners, as well as our Sun partners. But we've also been gathering lists from the Office of Violence Prevention from different parts of the county. So their public health department, their youth, their juvenile youth department. I'm getting all the departments wrong, but not just the Department of Youth County of County Services, Human Services. So we're trying to make sure that we're spreading it really wide, and we're going through the formal procurement process so that we can execute contracts with folks that we don't have an existing relationship with. So we'll need to go through that process.
And what's the size of the funds that we have that's going to be utilized here?
We're still finalizing that number. So I want to get you the accurate number. We need to take into account custodial and some of our internal facilities. So I'll be able to get that number to you shortly. We're still finishing up, but we're hoping to obviously use funding from the state and from federal resources.
Great. Look forward to hearing more about that.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay. Can I just clarify? Am I correct in thinking that PPS is not going to get any of the grant money from the city, that everything is going to have to be financed through the PPS budget? Is that accurate?
I guess so. In terms of the $6 million investment, those are all, the investments were all proposed either through partnerships or through city bureaus. That's correct.
Just to be clear about your question, Rita, I think so the city's putting new money into these programs. That's going to go directly to those programs. And I think I heard Danny say that we are also committing some dollars to programs that'll come from our budget.
Right, but we're not getting any money from the city, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay, I want to move on.
I was just going to mention, I buried the lead during the legislative update, that the Senate approved the money for the summer programming earlier today. So that's now headed to the governor's desk. So be hearing more about the rollout of the summer dollars and what the allotment looks like for PPS in the coming weeks.
That's the federal money that's being passed through the state that you're referring to? Or that's state money?
No, that's state money.
Oh, okay. Because the
That's
federal
the
dollars have already been released.
Right, that's the 250 million summer program dollars and childcare dollars that the governor and the Ways and Means committees worked on.
Okay, I want to move on to the next item on the agenda because it is a big one, and an update on the I-5 Rose Quarter project. And I don't know, Courtney, am I turning it over to you, or is Julia?
Yeah, I can get us
or
started,
both?
and Director Brim Edwards can sync up. So yeah, I think we've been involved in this. The school board has weighed in on the I-5 project for a couple of years. I know Director Bailey is very familiar. He and I had a road trip to Albany one time to testify to the OTC. That was fun. He bought me a hamburger on the way back. Anyway, just an aside. We've been involved. The board has passed resolutions a couple of times, once in March of 2019 and once in December of 2019, to say, hey, we would really like to do an EIS. These are the reasons that we have concerns. We want you to delve a little deeper into it and study this and share out that data so that we know what the potential impacts are going to be like for Tubman and its surrounding community. The Oregon Transportation Commission chose to do an EA, not an EIS, which is it's kind of an EI. It's a lighter dive. And then COVID hit, and we kind of, we were focused on other things. Director Brim Edwards has been sitting on the executive steering committee of the project for maybe 8 months now. I'm getting all of my calendars wrong, but I think it's about 8 months. That was once the OTC directed ODOT to create a few more community outreach opportunities. So they had a community group. I can't remember the name of that group because it was disbanded and is now the Historic Albina Advisory Group. And then they created, and then the ESC, the Executive Steering Committee, and they also have a CAC, the CAC, and I can't remember what that stands for. Maybe it's Community Advisory Committee. So we've been sitting at that table with a number of people, including the minority contractors, the truckers, I think, are on it. There's a bunch of other stakeholders that sit on the ESC that are relevant to the project. And then there's also a separate conversation that hinges on the project, which is the highway cover or CAPS conversation. And I attend those meetings to track kind of that conversation. And recently there's been more talk about, well, what is the Tubman situation looking like? And I'll maybe turn it over to Director Brim Edwards. At the last ESC meeting on March 23rd or 22nd, Nate McCoy from the minority contractors specifically asked, hey, what's the strategy from the district? And what about the community process? And is there a plan? And I think that's kind of a question that's still sitting out there. So Director Brim Edwards, maybe you want to speak to some of that since you were in the room and at that table.
Yeah, thanks for the recap, Courtney. I'll say that PPS has had two primary, there's a lot of different interests at the table and reasons why either people support the project or oppose it. I think it would be most accurate to describe that PPS has probably two primary interests. One relates to the impact on our facilities, and the second would be the CAPS. And for the purposes of this meeting, I want to focus primarily on impact on our facilities, primarily Harriet Tubman Middle School. On the CAPS, there has been a process that's ongoing that we haven't been the driver of, but we have been, I want to say, supportive of the requests and the work that Albina Vision Trust has done to date on this. And I think my impression is that is moving ahead in a way that it's moving ahead with it. I think in a way that's aligned with what the issues that Albina Vision Trust raised at the onset, and that I think we should assume that that's on track until it isn't. For right now. So then there's the issue of the impact on our facilities, and the primary impact clearly would be on Harriet Tubman. And the last meeting I thought was a really interesting meeting because they did bring in sort of their peer review group, but as noted, I was quite disappointed in ODOT and the presentation, and because fundamentally they're still making the argument that this project will make things better, which as the previous speakers during public comment have pointed out some of the underlying issues with that assertion. But the reality is taking bad air and making it slightly better is not healthy air for our students. And so that, when pressed at the last meeting, an acknowledgement that that wasn't the standard that they benchmarked against, it was just, would it be better? So it's from maybe really bad to less bad as a standard. So that's one thing. And then the second piece is we had more visibility to the planning and design, and this sort of, continuing the moving forward with the plan that moves the freeway even closer to our school, and not having really any answers as to what the construction impact would be on the school. And I think also, sort of most significantly, there were a number of other partners at the table who were specifically TriMet, who were quite surprised about the design as well. And so the point for where we are right now with PPS, they asked for a presentation on sort of our view on the impact and sort of what community outreach we've done. And I think I primarily tried to set expectations about the district staff coming and doing a presentation about impacts on our facilities, because we're right in the middle of reopening, and that is for the school district sort of our highest priority. But it would be important, I think, for the board to get a briefing on it and to set a direction so that we can speak as a board about whether what direction we want to take early on. And I'll credit Director Bailey with putting on the table a sort of an estimated number of what it might cost to move Tubman. And I know district staff has been asked to get sort of drill down on that number. So we have more than a ballpark. But at the end of the day, it appears, and we need to have a point of view as a district, that this project is going to, if it proceeds, is going to really make that site not an appropriate site long-term for a school. Now, would it be appropriate for some other use? Potentially, absolutely. It's still an important property, but for school use, not likely. And so developing a point of view that is, the district leadership, including the board, but that also has input from our school community, and the neighboring community is going to be important. Courtney, did I summarize that piece
perfectly?
accurately?
Yeah, great. That was great.
Yeah, no, that was really helpful. Thanks. Let me open it up to questions. I have a few, but I'll wait. Let me open it up to questions from board members, and maybe Rita, we'll start with you and then open it up to others if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you. A general comment and then an actual question. So I was a little surprised that we didn't get supporting documents to accompany the PowerPoint, the ODOT PowerPoint. And I was told that there weren't any. And I was given the link to the ODOT site, so I went in and looked at previous meetings and discovered that essentially none of the meetings have a lot of supporting materials, which is a little concerning. And it's apparently mostly done through PowerPoint presentations that are remarkably content-free, as far as I could tell. So that's concerning to me. My actual question is, apparently on the March 22nd steering committee meeting, PPS was an agenda item. And I appreciate the summary, but was there an actual statement that was issued? Like, what was our presentation?
Yeah, there wasn't that's probably an overstatement. It was that we had been asked to come to the April meeting, and they just wanted us a response of whether we'd be coming to the April meeting with a presentation. And what Courtney and I, the discussion in advance was, this is not the time to be asking Dan Jung and the facilities team to be putting together a presentation right in the middle of reopening.
Okay.
Okay. It was literally, this is what we've asked of PPS, and Courtney and I, and we talked to Dan in advance as well. But it just was that that would be challenging for the district to come up with that.
Mostly acknowledgement that we would come back in April.
Okay. So does that mean you're wanting the board to come up with, I mean, and I appreciate this. I'm all in favor of this. But is there a deadline by which you want the board to kind of come up with some sort of direction?
Yeah, we'd ideally, as soon as we get schools reopened, like to engage the board around what we would set as our sort of direction for, it's going to be district staff in terms of what we want to ask of ODOT. And it's not really asking this executive steering, because it's an advisory committee. So that's it. Let's just be clear. OTC and ODOT made very clear that this is like advisory and it really doesn't have any decision-making capacity. So what we would like is the point of view from the district of what we're going to tell ODOT is that what we perceive as the impact and how we think it should be addressed.
Okay. And I guess my last question is very, very concrete. So with the expansion of the proposed expansion of the of I-5 to further, a further incursion onto Harriet Tubman property, what is the actual distance between the highway or the wall and the school at the closest point?
So I don't know that we have that information at the top of at our fingertips. I know I've asked Joe Crellier to join us because he sits on our little internal technical team, and that is a question that we want the answer to. And Joe, I don't know if you have anything you want to add, but I think we're trying to figure that out.
The other thing I'd say is, ODOT has offered to do like one-on-one briefings. Courtney and I think it's going to be important that it be a public briefing with materials in advance, and so what they've designed, because it feels like the project is it's fairly opaque, to your point, Director Moore. And I say the standard that they're using on air quality is not a standard that we agreed to, nor do I think that most of us would, I don't want to speak for everybody, but not the standard that we would want for our students. And again, to date, ODOT has not been able to articulate during the construction phase of the project, which we know would have really significant impacts as well on the site, of what the proposed mitigation, if there's a middle school there, what they would propose.
Great. Amy or Scott? Amy, go ahead.
So I do not want or feel like I need any more information from ODOT. I think it's time for us to just send a letter that says these impacts are obvious to us, to our students. And, if in order for this project to go through, it's clear to us that you're going to need to purchase this property. And then we get our ducks in a row in terms of the valuation for the property. We already know that there's going to be some taking involved, and especially it's my understanding that it's encroaching even further than was previously explained. And so, I don't think there's any reason for us to get any more mired in this process or do briefings or anything. We know that it is not an appropriate site for our students, given the impact that is predicted, both short-term and long-term. So I would like to free us up from this sort of bureaucratic morass and make our position really clear to ODOT as soon as possible, that they're going to need to buy this asset from us in order to move forward. And I think that with a very minimal amount of time from a decent land use attorney, we can come up with some pretty compelling points as to why that's clearly necessary. So I just want to really caution us from just any more briefings, any more questions, any of that. Like, we know that this is going to have an intolerable impact for our students. And then the other piece is that we need to share with them that we're embarking on a community-driven process to identify, what we're doing in North Portland with our Center for Black Student Excellence, and that the relocation of Harriet Tubman is and should be likely a part of that. And so the sooner we can resolve this matter with them, and they can, provide for us by buying that asset, and we can put those funds toward the relocation of Harriet Tubman, the sooner we can fold that into that other process that is going to get underway here shortly. So I just feel really strongly that we need to act quickly. We've done enough. We don't need any more information to know what the impacts are, and we need to be really clear with them.
Thanks, Amy. Appreciate that. Scott?
Yeah, I want to agree with, I think, everything Amy said. Director Constam. I don't understand what we would say any differently to the advisory committee that would have any impact on anything that we haven't already put in writing or said in testimony.
Yeah, so, well, we need to do the due diligence of what the cost would be, what we're anticipating it would be. In addition, I don't think that ODOT is actually the, while they may be the project, be driving the project, they're not the ones that would have the money to purchase the school.
Why is that? They buy right away all the time. And this is right away. They're encroaching.
Well, I don't think they have $100 million, $80 to $100 million in this project budget.
Well, then they're going to need to find it if they're going to want to put that freeway right next to that school.
Right. Well, that's been part of the conversations that we've been having.
They've already been, I mean, we're already, I think, on the record of saying it's 80 to 100 million. I mean, that's already there. And again, you know, tactically, I'm not against somebody going and testifying, just to let people know. And the other thing I would add is, since apparently ODOT has been planning on this lane expansion for a couple of years, this isn't just something new that popped out. They've been completely disingenuous, and that's a kind word, with us and with the community as a whole. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think maybe you can nod, Joe, that there was an accompanying memo to the map of the widening that was dated 2018 for internal discussion only. That's at least, yes, there's a head nod. So, you know, this is just another, just another breach of trust by ODOT.
The other thing to consider too, though, is that like when we make a demand that they buy us out, I mean, they then have a valuable asset that has some utility for other purposes. And there are a lot of people in the community talking about some kind of interesting ideas about what that might be, maybe even in partnership with ODOT, like a workforce training center or something, the collaboration between different government entities. And not to get too tangled up here, but the federal infrastructure bill coming down the pike has a lot of money in it for workforce training. And this is an idea that that is starting to get some traction in our community, right? To be housed at the Tubman site. So
I don't know why anybody would want to house something there with the air quality so bad and getting worse if the project goes through. We know now the back of the school isn't safe. And I think with you carve off another however many feet it is, the front of the school isn't going to be breathable.
I have a couple of questions. Sorry, go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say, that's what we've presented throughout this entire engagement with them. And I think it's a matter of us having something, you know, can't present a bill of here's what it would cost if we don't know what it would cost to build a new middle school. I also believe that there's a conversation that we need to structure, and that can be done in short order with the, once we get through the reopening, with the Harriet Tubman school community, because I don't think it's respectful for us for people to read in the paper we're demanding that they buy the school when we haven't had a conversation yet. And I'm not saying that I definitely believe that needs to happen. We do need to have a conversation with the community so that they're aware of it and that they can be part of that conversation.
Thanks. How much is the project total, the ODOT project, roughly? Does anyone know offhand?
Well, it's a moving target.
It was originally 750 million, and it's gone up to like 8 or 9 or 850.
I was curious, and I'll.
Yeah, I thought it was originally around 5, and now it's up to 8. And
I think it was 450 or 435 originally, and now it's beyond 800.
Okay, I was trying to get a sense of magnitude. We talked to Julie. You mentioned the air quality, and I'm curious, given some of the testimony earlier. So, and I really appreciated your point. I thought it was a good one of ODOT saying, "Oh, the air quality will be a little bit better," and you were sort of questioning, you know, is that really the appropriate metric, right? Going from really, really bad to just a little bit better. I have another question though. Do we trust their data? right? So is there any way for us to validate the underlying assumptions that they made, that even to sort of get a sense of when they said it's a little bit better, do we believe that it is a little bit better, or is that even a question?
Well, I'm not a environmental scientist, so
Yeah, sorry, not asking you to validate that. I'm more asking, is there a way for us to validate that?
I would think so. And I'll just also point out that when there was a discussion about the guiding criteria, and I proposed language that the air quality be the standard, be at a healthy air standard, that ODOT and suggested that they wanted language that would be better than the current, and that is what the executive steering committee adopted. I voted against that, but they're clearly attached to their standard of better. But I think there's two weaknesses in the standard. One, whether their underlying numbers are correct, and then whether it's going to be better, and then second, whether that's even the right standard to have set for the project.
Yeah, okay. I would be interested in, even if it's an outside group that's done some work on this, just who is sort of validating that, and kind of gets back to these questions of induced demand, and if those things have been ignored, but we took that into account, with does that impact the overall air quality numbers? And because I think it's one, we should validate that even their initial analysis, whether it's accurate, and then two, whether they're using the right metric. I think they're both really important questions.
Andrew, Joe has a hand up.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Joe. Crowley, right?
Oh yeah, Chairman Scott and members of the committee, good evening. I've been tasked by Dan Young to find an environmental contractor that can basically do that peer review and or set our own metrics that are applicable to schools. We have PBS Engineering and Environmental on contract, had them on for a long time for a variety of uses. And we've also looking at a scope that is a little more expansive. And so we may go with PBS or another provider, but that'll be coming along shortly. And also have asked for ODOT to provide more than just an aerial or overhead view of the project, because it was in my opinion that a side view or an up close would just bring a better orientation, especially when we're talking about the walls, right? And relative to the size of a car, relative to the size of the building and the closeness. But in short, on the question about can we validate or can we compare to their environmental studies, we are on track to do that.
Great. Thanks, Joe. No, I really appreciate that. I know a lot of you have been working on this for a long time, so I'm sorry if this is a remedial question, but what are our points of influence in this process, right? I mean, I appreciate, Julia serving on the executive steering committee. I think it's funny that's an advisory body, though. Usually steering committees are a little bit more than that, but I guess that's how ODOT has defined it.
Yeah. And it was much disputed because you have, the heads of a lot of the local jurisdictions serving on it. And it's like, well, it's just advisory. And OTC was, very clear, like they weren't, and, the question was like, is it even worth serving on it? And I think some groups have decided, very publicly not to serve on it because of that capacity. So, the decision-making is really ultimately going to be OTC.
Right. And I guess that's, and I'm happy I can have a follow-up with either you or Courtney just to sort of bring me up to speed on it. But I mean, the school board does not, and the school district does not have any official approval of this project, correct?
Correct.
I don't know about, yes, but I wonder, I don't know if we have to approve, if they're going to encroach further onto Tubman property, we would have to allow that, right? We wouldn't.
I'm guessing there's eminent domain, statute that applies there. The only reason I'm asking, and again, but I think it is important publicly that we talk about both, what's our formal and then what's our informal, influence in this. And I think my understanding of this project is our formal influence is pretty limited. Sorry, did I say that right? Our formal influence is limited. Our informal influence, though, it can be significant. And I think that's just as an intergovernmental committee and then as a board, just, talking about what are those ways. And, it's through the engagement and there may be some legal, action as well if it comes down to that, but just sort of understanding that both so we understand it, but also the community understands it, I think is important. I will just, I'll just sort of, I think it's a really, I'm going to use the Build Back Better language, right? But, part of, we're hearing a lot of the federal infrastructure, but locally as well, and reimagining Oregon, and all of this is, in my mind comes together in terms of it's not enough to simply mitigate, right, the impacts that might happen. And I agree with others that have said it's not enough to just simply say, well, it's a little bit better. I mean, we're undergoing a revolution in terms of how government thinks about these projects, and it's a long overdue revolution, but it's this whole idea that we have to do more for historically underrepresented, communities. This is a historically underrepresented community and a school. And by doing more, there is a restorative justice component to this work. And I feel like a lot of governments are sort of waking up to this and going down this road, and it does not feel like ODOT has caught up. And so I think part of this is using our influence publicly to talk about it, but also our influence with the state legislature and influence with the governor's office to make ODOT do this. I mean, this is not that revolutionary, right? To sort of look at a project like this and say, we can't just think about it in terms of the highway widening or that. We have to think more broadly, and that's hard for organizations to break out of. But again, they won't be the first, right? Governments all over the region, all over the country are doing this and sort of saying, no, we have to take into account that, not only, does this make it inappropriate for a school use to be this close? It was inappropriate when we did this back in the 40s and 50s and 60s. So how do we rectify that historical wrong, the generations of children that have gone through this school and suffered as a result of that air quality? And how do we, and maybe, the way to make good on that is to actually figure out where 80 or $100 million is going to come from to move this school and see that positive benefit. And I don't really think that was a big leap in the 80s. It's a big leap in the 90s. It's not a big leap today for the way governments need to be thinking about infrastructure projects. So I really appreciated the sort of conversation about our next steps, and I will just tell you, I think we should have some more conversation about it. I do think a board briefing would be helpful, and Director Constam, I appreciate your point of, look, we've been around this block before, and what we need is a strong statement. I think from a public perspective, hearing from ODOT, having a chance for us as a board to ask them the hard questions directly in a public forum, I think is really beneficial, even if we've already kind of asked those questions before and we sort of know what their answer is going to be. I think there is some benefit to that. So I think getting that, I think Director Brim Edwards, your point about the community engagement is really important. As much as we as a board might feel like we want to go down a road, we do need to engage the community. I don't think it's going to be any surprise where the community is on this, but at least figuring out what that looks like and recognizing we're in the middle of reopening right now. So that's kind of challenging. Maybe I missed the answer to the question though, in terms of timing. Is there a deadline by which ODOT's going to be taking some action that we can't miss or we shouldn't miss?
To the answer to that question, I think we have a range. Like I say, we're primarily trying to get beyond April, just given everything that's happening. I want to go back to your point about how things have changed. And I do think there wouldn't have been this conversation at all, but for PPS just wielding its sort of moral authority here and saying, you can't just move ahead with this project and run over us. And they have set up this larger structure. And I fundamentally support what you've said about the different context of today, because the primary ODOT argument is this project actually will make things a little bit better. And really the conversation that needs to happen is about the original sin. Because it's about what happened to Tubman when when ODOT could just do what they wanted to do, and they just, placed the freeway right there. So it's not just about, well, it's just going to be incrementally more. It's about fundamentally what ODOT did originally. And this is just further exacerbating that original action they took. And I do think that the conversations around infrastructure, it's a different conversation. And to set ourselves up, I think we need the information that Joe had, just as we should have the facts, because they'll be saying this is making things better. And we need to be able to have the facts and the impacts on our students. I do think we need to have that community meeting, even though we may not be surprised. Again, nobody should wake up in the morning and read a story in the paper or hear something on the radio about Tubman and, we've decided to move it and we're asking ODOT to pay for it. That needs to be a community conversation. And lastly, I do think we can put the numbers together, and if we have a solid set of numbers and we have had the conversation with the community, the informal role we have is to be able to have those conversations.
Can I just add a little bit? I agree with pretty much what everybody has said. But I'd also like to mention the extra added layer of PPS's articulated commitment to be a champion of morally acceptable response to climate change. We've made several statements publicly as a district, as a board, and the policy committee is right now considering a pretty expansive and aggressive policy for the climate crisis response. So I think the dimension that hasn't been mentioned yet today is around the impact that an expanded I-5 would have on climate change, and that this is going in exactly the wrong direction. So I appreciate that our principal focus, certainly the initially animating focus was Harriet Tubman, but I also think we need to put it into the broader context of climate change.
Thanks,
So,
Rita. I appreciate that. Yeah.
So along those lines, I think there is value in having a board discussion around these issues.
Okay. We are 15 minutes
This is
over. Go ahead,
this is
Scott.
something our students will expect of us and hold us to that standard.
Yeah.
I do want to say with the, kind of getting our numbers, my limited experience in transportation impact arguments in development is one side has their numbers, another side has their numbers, they never agree. I think it's important that we come up with something. It will have to, I think, challenge their traffic analysis as well as the environmental impact of that traffic. I think the notion that they'll build walls to help keep the pollution out as well as noise, there's no way to predict the wind patterns around structures like that. You could end up making things worse. So there's a lot of unknowns in there that we'll have to, I think, cop to in this process that ODOT has not copped to.
Okay.
To the extent that we go ahead and do that, it's really, and I think we should bill ODOT for it. They're not going to pay for it, but we shouldn't have to do this. We should not have to do any of this.
Okay. Thank you for this conversation. I think next steps are to discuss whether, I guess, the timing of potentially having ODOT come and give us a briefing on the project. Julia, do you want to deal with board leadership on scheduling that, or half of board leadership is here right now, or do you want me to follow up as the IGC committee chair?
Scott, do you need something in writing, or will you take this to the agenda setting meeting?
Okay, so I'm confused. Director Constam, did I hear you say you weren't interested in having ODOT come and brief us? So just want to.
Fine, if that's what people want. I just feel like we have the information. We know what the impacts currently are. We know they're going to be exacerbated, and it's time for us to make a strong statement to them. I think we've spent a lot of time on something that's very peripheral to our mission. And, we need to just move on our interests. But if other people want to, have them come and do a briefing, fine. I don't really see the value now.
Well, the value that first of all, I think the individuals on the board need to know what our ask is, but also ultimately, this isn't like ODOT's not going to come up with the money, like the House Speaker is, the governor's office. Somebody has to put this on the list for the infrastructure list. And, I think we're having our facts down and our arguments, we need to be able to say, here is what ODOT is planning on doing. And to date, it is been somewhat hard to get them on the record for exactly how this project is going to impact Tubman.
So Scott, I think the question for you and Chair Lowry is in terms of, as board leadership, do you want to put this on? I think Director Constam has a good point. You've heard from Julia and me, and I think Rita sort of expressed, that there's some value in it. So I'll turn that over to you all on agenda setting.
Sounds good. I will
figure out.
I will take that forward and
I think sooner is better, but also we need to get some of that data as well from the team, from the technical team.
Yeah.
And then I think the question after that is, so I actually think figuring out if we're going to do that ODOT briefing for the board, public briefing, and then having a conversation of when we want to engage with the Tubman community, and again, being respectful of how that fits into our reopening plan and staff commitments right now, I think is going to be important. Really appreciate this update. Thank you for this and the conversation, and more to come. We're about 20 minutes over, but I did want to give Courtney a chance to just give us a really high level overview of the federal infrastructure package and how it might impact schools, and then maybe do a quick round of questions around that in terms of again, where our influence, what our role can be.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. Obviously, we all have been hearing a lot about infrastructure from the president and Congress right now. There's I sent you guys the bill that is the sort of baseline bill that they're using to sort of start the conversation about school infrastructure. And I know this is music to Director Constam's ears because she's been talking about school infrastructure a lot over the last few years. But there's $100 billion right now is kind of the number that's floating around. 50 billion would be grants, and the other 50 would be bonding. There's also, and I've been in touch with Blumenauer's office this week and DeFazio's office too, actually, because they have surface transportation reauthorization, and there's other places to find money for things. So I'm just kind of paying attention to those bills and keeping in close touch with our delegation about where we can be most influential in our advocacy. And I'll continue to reach out to our local folks. And then, of course, we're involved with the Council for the Great City Schools. And so I'm on regular calls with them to see how things are playing out and how we can be helpful. So I'll just keep you all updated. There's not a lot of information yet, but it's definitely a topic of huge concern for all urban districts and really any school district, because we all know that our facilities are old and we need to inject them with more modernization dollars.
Yeah. So Courtney, and this is great, and I don't mean in any way to look a gift horse in the mouth. It's long overdue, and it'd be great. I just want to be clear though, $50 billion of bonding capacity
Right.
is simply a way of making bonds a little bit less expensive, right? They're still okay. I wanted to make sure that everyone's clear on that part of it.
I appreciate that, and I think you're right. And also, it's a starting point. So I think that's the conversation that's going to have to happen as the months. I don't know how long this is going to take. I don't know what the timeline is exactly yet, but certainly there's also other like seismic and HVAC dollars, I'm told, in some other places. So I think we just need to. This is not a one and done. This is multiple places to play on these conversations about how do we modernize our buildings and our facilities. So, but I'll let you guys know how things shake out. And as I had a good conversation this week about earmarks, because earmarks 10 years ago when I worked in Congress, I was in charge of earmarks for Senator Merkley, and that was when they still had them. And then they went away, and now they're making their way back, and they will not be a part of the infrastructure package, I've confirmed, but there are some member requests coming through, but they're very, very few, and we really can't fit into any of those buckets. And this was the case long ago too. But I just wanted you to know that I did do the research to find out that was probably not an option. But I'll keep, if that changes, I'll certainly, be in touch with Dan and the team. But I think that's probably not going to happen for this. For member requests will not be a place for us to go after dollars. Those are usually last in dollars and very small amount of money, and usually only a few projects per member. So
great. Any questions for Courtney?
Just to say, I was contacted by a school community that was trying to get Merkley to do an earmark for their school.
I know who you're talking about, and I've been in touch with that parent this week, and he's wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But we are a school system.
Yeah.
Great. Anyone else have any questions? Courtney, let us know how we can be helpful in that, in terms of with our local delegation. Obviously, our local delegation will be supportive of this, but
we're really lucky, right? We have a great delegation that supports what we do and definitely supports improving our infrastructure. So, we should thank our lucky stars for that. But well, and a delegation, that is supportive, but also a delegation that's in positions of power in Congress. And so to the extent there are, it is very, the most effective way to get changes is when they hear from local constituents. So if there are, even if there are things that would help nationally, we can actually be the voice and we can also connect with our counterparts in other districts that might be, for example, in DeFazio's district, because he's the T&I chair, transportation and infrastructure chair in the House. So, are there ways that we can push, 4J because he may not listen to us because we're not as constituent. I'm just thinking there are other ways to get around it. So.
Yeah, great. Okay. Any other things for this committee? I appreciate everyone's willingness to go long. I think it was a good conversation tonight.
Hey, Andrew, one other thing, just on the community engagement, who would be the appropriate person? I don't know if that's Courtney, to give the Jonathan and Shanice a heads up that that's something, just because I know everybody's got full plates, but to get that just flagged for them, that's a conversation that needs to happen.
I'll do that.
Great, thank you.
Great, thank you.
It's on Jonathan's radar, but I'll make sure that I recap this with him.
Cool. Okay, thank you, everybody. With that, we will adjourn the Intergovernmental Committee meeting. I'll see you all soon.